Hi, everyone. So as Mark mentioned, my name is Emily Freeman, and I'm on the Insights team at LinkedIn. So I get to work with LinkedIn's data and help our clients figure out the most effective ways to market on LinkedIn for their specific needs. So we look at things like different audience behaviors on LinkedIn, what are people reading, what are they interested in, and we help our clients make decisions in a really effective and engaging way. And at LinkedIn, we have a tradition when we introduce ourselves to share something about ourselves that you wouldn't necessarily know by looking at our LinkedIn profile. So I'm going to share that I grew up playing competitive tournament chess, and I played nationally, and now I play street chess. So you might find me in Union Square or Washington Square Park. If anyone is a chess player or is interested in that, definitely find me later. So today we're going to be talking about an A/B test that we ran with a client in order to understand the impact of advertising with brand messaging in addition to acquisition messaging. So in this case, when I say brand messaging, what I'm really referring to is messaging that is specific to a company and their brand. So messaging like, the value of this company or why you should buy products from this company, but really generally about the company. Acquisition messaging, on the other hand, is more product-focused messaging. So messaging about why you should buy this specific product or click here now to buy the product. So that's kind of the differentiation between those two different types of messages. And in this case, we're talking solely about sponsored content on the LinkedIn platform. So content that's showing up in your feed where everything else is showing up. And so in that case, it is native. So the client that we worked with really wanted to understand, they had previously only been really advertising with acquisition messaging. And they wanted to understand, can we actually uplift the success metrics that we're seeing by also having brand messaging in addition to that acquisition messaging? Can we push the needle even further? So that's what we set out to do with them. This is how we designed the experiment. So we took the audience that our client was interested in reaching, and we split them into two different segments. The first segment, we only targeted with acquisition messaging. So that was kind of their control group, you can call it, because that's what they had already been running with us previously. The second segment, we targeted first with brand messaging. So remember that company level messaging. And then after people were targeted with the brand messaging, they were then retargeted with acquisition messaging. So they were seeing that product message after. And ultimately, the two groups of people that we ended up analyzing were people that only saw acquisition messaging and people that saw both acquisition and brand messaging. And we wanted to, again, see, is there an effect here when we use both messages? So here are the results, which were really exciting. What we found is that members who were exposed to both brand and acquisition messaging were over 6 times more likely to convert. And in this case, we talked with the client and we learned what their success metrics were. So we wanted to understand what types of conversion actions on our platform did they deem successful, and that's how we decided what our conversion rate should be based on. And so again, people that saw both types of messages were 6 times more likely to convert. So that helps us understand that people were really being moved through that customer funnel by first being nurtured with the brand messaging and then following up with that product and acquisition messaging. They worked really well together. In addition to looking at the hard metrics of seeing who's actually signing up for products or landing on a landing page, we also did a brand survey. And so we looked at the same two different groups of people that were exposed only to acquisition messaging and people that were exposed to both brand and acquisition messaging. And we asked them questions like, of the following list of companies, which companies do you recognize? And our client was one of those companies. And what we found is that, similar to the results on the previous slide, we found that people that were exposed to both brand and acquisition messaging were 7%, they had a 7% higher likelihood to recognize the company that we were advertising for. So that was really interesting. And then we also found that when the list of companies was shown, again with our client on the list, and the question to survey respondents was, how likely are you to recommend this brand to your friend or your family member? We found that they were 33% higher to recommend, 33% more likely to recommend the company if they had seen both types of messages. So again, these are directional evidence that tells us the importance of advertising with both types of messaging. So here we're really understanding a couple things. One is that different types of messages are serving different purposes as consumers are seeing these types of ads on our platform. And they can actually really work very well together. So in this case, we saw that acquisition messaging was really reinforcing the brand messaging that people had seen previously. We also saw that in this particular case, the way that the client had designed their two different assets, their acquisition messaging and their brand messaging, they kept a very common theme and tone. And we think that that really helped connect the dots for consumers as they were seeing these ads. The fact that the tone and look and feel felt similar across the different messages allowed the consumer to really associate those messages together, and it allowed for that synergistic effect to take place between the two different types of messages. A couple of ideas that we've had outside of this test in follow-up have been not only to test both brand and acquisition messaging the way we did, where we first did brand and then we did acquisition, but also to try running those in tandem at the same time. And just seeing, do we see the same effect? Do we see something increase or decrease? And kind of learning, is it important that the brand messaging come first, or can we experiment with that? Also thinking about that different customers are going to be at different points in their own personal customer journey at any given point in time, and thinking about how we can reach the maximum number of clients at the right time with the right message for them. We also would want to increase our sample size, especially for the brand survey, so that we can get more statistically significant results. These are really strong in terms of directional results, but again, if we had more data, we'd be able to draw some more conclusive results here. The other thing that I wanted to say is that from this, I think we learned that brand and acquisition can work really well together. And that might be a great finding for your companies, your clients, to really try working with these two different types of messages together. The other thing is I really think the value of A/B testing is just so huge. Being able to run a test for your client or your company and see what works for your specific audiences, your specific messages, your specific brand, and really testing those out together, that's really the way to figure out what works best for your specific situation. So I think it's great to learn from case studies and to try inputting these new ideas into your tests. But again, trying version 1 versus version 2, if version 1 works better, go with that and try version 3. Then use whatever works better after that. So I think there's this iterative process that we're seeing more and more with our clients, and we recommend it as well, because that's really the best way to learn what works. Any questions? Yes.
Have you ever tested with brand content only?
Yes, that's a great question. So the question was, have we ever tested with brand content only? So this particular study was just designed to test the incremental success that we saw when we ran both together. We did have some side results that looked at people who were only exposed to brand, but since the design of the test was specifically intended that anybody who saw brand would also see an acquisition message, we didn't feel like it was really the right setup of the test to be able to look at those results. I do think it would be interesting to run a similar test and to have brand be kind of a third bucket. But in this case, even though we did have some people that only ended up seeing brand, we didn't feel like it was true to the core of the experiment to actually get those results. But I think it would be a great idea. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, hold on. I have a question. Sorry. My question is that what was the time lag between seeing the branded message to the acquisition message? And did you play around with that variable?
Yeah, so that's a great idea. We basically ran the experiment for about a quarter. And for half of the time, we showed brand messaging, and then the other half of the time, we showed acquisition messaging for that segment 2 audience that saw both. So different people within that audience would have seen brand messaging at different times and acquisition messaging at different times within those 2 different time slots. So we didn't look specifically into, is there an optimal amount of time between seeing brand and then seeing acquisition, but it's something that we're talking a lot about, and I think that would be a great additional point to add on. Not only does it matter which order we see them in, but also how many days or how much time in between would be optimal. So I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.